So there's been a lot of new information that has come out about the stimulus checks promised by the Biden administration. So now the Democrats do have a slim majority. They have 50 senators. Kamala Harris, of course, gets 51st. She can break the tie, which gives the Democrats the majority. Bernie Sanders, Chairman Bernie, heading the budget committee. And so you would think that we'd be able to get something out rather quickly to the millions of people who are suffering right now in this country as a result of coronavirus. Well, there was a big campaign promise made by Joe Biden, Raphael Warnock, John Ossoff, a lot of Democratic politicians, Chuck Schumer, of sending out $2,000 stimulus checks, basically, as soon as you get into power, right? So they're in power now, and well, you know what? First, before we do that, I do want to show you some of those promises. This was put together on Twitter by a Twitter account at DemWatchdog. So I want you to take a look at this.
If you send John and the Reverend to Washington, those $2,000 checks will go out the door.
We will be able to pass $2,000 stimulus checks for the people next week.
We'll deliver the $2,000 stimulus checks.
And that begins with the $2,000 stimulus.
When you send me and Reverend Warnock to the Senate, we will pass those $2,000 stimulus checks. You send me and Reverend Warnock to the Senate, we will pass those $2,000 stimulus checks.
They will make decisions about whether we give people a $2,000 check.
We need to pass $2,000 stimulus checks for the people.
For getting people that $2,000 in relief, direct payment.
Congress should pass $2,000 checks. President-elect Biden and Democrats are all pushing for $2,000 relief checks.
$2,000 stimulus checks.
$2,000 relief checks. $2,000 relief checks. They should send $2,000 checks to the American people right now.
Supporting $2,000 relief payments right now.
We need to be passing the $2,000 stimulus relief checks.
That means we need John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, who will go to D.C. to ensure the $2,000 checks.
You see ads that say, want your $2,000 stimulus check? Vote Democrat. Vote for Warnock.
The stimulus check. Chuck Schumer is trying to increase it to $2,000.
Well, I actually have a bill for that.
One of the first things that I want to do when our new senators are seated is deliver the $2,000 checks to the American family.
$2,000 check. I mean, I didn't hear them saying $1,400 plus $600 from Trump. I just heard them say $2,000 checks. I mean, you heard it. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we're in some sort of mass delusion, and they were saying $1,400 plus $600 the entire time. I don't know. But anyway, so that's not going to happen. You've actually got the Biden administration planning to give $1,400 checks. And even that is running into some difficulties. In fact, you have Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is standing in the way. You also have Joe Biden pushing any relief bill to be as bipartisan as possible, which means dealing with Republicans, which means Republicans right now are pushing for even less stimulus. In fact, one of the recent proposals by Republicans, these are the 10 so-called moderates they would need to break a legislative filibuster. They are calling for $1,000 checks. So not $2,000, not $1,400, $1,000 checks, and of course to limit eligibility. And so now, I've explained before, if you're going to give to Republican demands, then ultimately whatever package you pass is going to reduce the effectiveness of any relief bill. Now, I think that is something that we as a country can ill afford to do. And so now, to be fair, Ossoff and Warnock, they said $2,000 checks, and on a conference call with other Democratic leaders, he's like, we should do the $2,000 checks. We got elected from that. We're kind of mad at leadership right now. And so that's something that, Democrats didn't really want to get out as far as Ossoff and Warnock. And they're saying, hey, this is what we promised. We should actually deliver. And there are other Democrats in the Democratic Party who are also saying, why aren't we doing the $2,000 checks? Let's do it. Let's do it. Even Chuck Schumer's been better on this issue. But again, you have people like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin that are consistently standing in the way of you actually getting not only $1,400 checks, but definitely, $2,000 checks, basically are off the table at this point. But that's not all. There's also another wrinkle in this plan. And this is where I go to an excellent report in the Daily Poster written by Andrew Perez, who notes the nation's biggest lobbyist group is now pushing Democrats to cut that even further. So here's how they're going to do it. Okay, so now top Democrats, Andrew writes, are reportedly considering excluding millions of families from the $1,400 stimulus checks, and Biden himself has said he is willing to negotiate with the Republicans on limiting eligibility. Not as far as Republicans, but again, they still want to end up cutting eligibility for those checks. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which spent $82 million lobbying in Washington last year, had recently sent a letter to the White House and Congress on Tuesday, urging them to consider targeting any additional stimulus checks based on income, loss of employment, or similar criteria. So now understand that the stimulus checks that already went out and the stimulus checks that are in the $1.9 trillion stimulus deal are already targeted. Understand, they're already targeted. And we have another name for that, by the way. It's means testing. So we already have means testing. Now they're asking for even more means testing. In fact, the chamber wrote, while the pandemic-induced recession has created near unprecedented levels of hardship, the impact has not been universal. Well, of that we can be sure. Wealthy people have actually done extremely well. But they're their version of wealthy people is not the same as everybody else's version of wealthy people in this country. I mean, the whole fact that, that there are people making $500,000 that are considered middle class in this country is ridiculous. So our definitions of what middle class is are incredibly skewed in this country. So now the chamber said this, quote, the Census Bureau Pulse Survey indicates that while a majority of households with less than $50,000 in income, considered the middle class, which that's a joke in this country. Seriously, $50,000 is not middle class, all right? At least not in the cities. They've experienced a loss of employment income with the majority of households with more than $50,000 in income, including those between $50,000 and $150,000, have not experienced any loss in earned income. So now you might think, okay, well, based on that, maybe we should do targeting. We don't want rich people getting money, right? But wait, it turns out that this is misleading. They actually twisted what the data said in order to make a point and to frame the survey results as being something that they're not. All right. Recent census data shows that 45% of households earning between $50,000 and $150,000 have experienced a loss of employment income since March of 2020, including 48% of households earning between $50,000 and $75,000. So that's nearly half. So, hey, it turns out if you don't have income coming in, you kind of can't afford your bills. And it's been a year, and we've got very little stimulus measures, a total of $1,800 spread out across an entire year. Well, I mean, look, I hate to point it out, but like $1,800 is a month of rent in some places. And so, come on. Really? So, yeah. Here's the thing. There are those people who were making a decent amount of money between $50,000 and $150,000, $75,000 to $125,000 or whatever, that could use those checks. But unfortunately, you have not only the Chamber of Commerce, but you also have establishment media, billionaires, that are saying that no, they shouldn't get any more money. In fact, we should really kind of limit who gets this money so that it's not universal, so we can create a little class warfare, at least in my opinion. That's my read of the situation. So now you have the Washington Post, who's working together with Larry Summers, Bloomberg News, both owned by billionaires, respectively, to say that we cannot give you checks and that we shouldn't because you don't really need it. Now remember, they've already nickel and dimed you away from $2,000. and they use some tricky math to avoid paying you more. And now they're asking for more stimulus means testing to a stimulus bill that's already been means tested all to hell. And so, I mean, that's the situation. So now Senate Republicans on Monday proposed that Congress limit full stimulus checks to individuals earning up to $40,000 and couples earning $80,000, a move that would deny checks to an additional 80 million people, according to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. The White House indicated that it does not support the GOP proposed income caps, but Biden and his team have continually said that they are open to further limiting eligibility. The Washington Post's Jeff Stein reported on Tuesday that some senior Democrats are looking at lowering the threshold on stimulus payments so they start phasing out above $50,000 for single taxpayers, $75,000 for heads of household, and $100,000 for married couples. He cautioned that the talks are still fluid. Now, the kicker is that while they are limiting eligibility for checks that it could impact tens of millions of families, the same congressional Democrats are now floating tax cuts for the rich. Of course. Absolutely. Now, basically, what they want to do is that they want to modify and repeal the federal deduction for state and local taxes. That's the SALT tax. By itself, repealing the SALT cap would overwhelmingly benefit high-income households, since most low and middle-income taxpayers don't actually face the SALT cap. The top 1% would receive actually 56% of the benefits of a repeal, and the top 5% of households would receive over 80% of the benefit, while the bottom 80% of households would receive just 4%, according to the Tax Policy Center. So understand that you have more, tax cuts for them, more means tests for you. So now there's more information. So the campaign to limit survival check eligibility was also boosted by a think tank. This is economists at Opportunity Insights. And this think tank is bankrolled by the family foundations of Mark Zuckerberg, Michael Bloomberg, and Bill Gates. All, of course, massive billionaires. Now, the study, based on consumer spending data, found that households with incomes above $78,000 would only spend about $45 of the $600 payments they receive within the first month of checks being sent. The authors wrote that these households have largely returned to work and have accrued additional savings. Perez counters that by writing that while lower income households have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, the census data suggests that huge swaths of Americans across all income levels have been impacted by COVID-19. And also notes that the Opportunity Insight study notably lumps together all households earning more than $78,000, when census data indicates that families earning between $75,000 and $150,000 are actually significantly more likely to have experienced a loss in income during the pandemic than households earning more than $200,000. And of course, absent from this discussion is the fact that eligibility for these next checks is determined based on 2019, the 2019 tax returns before the pandemic even started. So lots of small businesses, by the way, went out of business as a result of the pandemic. Lots of people lost good jobs. They had their hours reduced as a result of the shutdown. That's why, of course, I support a universal check program. You just send everybody a $2,000 check. That's it. And then, of course, increase taxes on the wealthy. Now, that way, nobody falls through the cracks. But it also ends up stimulating the economy, as it should, and the checks go out faster. There's no means testing. The only thing that's getting in the way of that, of course, is Joe Manchin, and Biden desperately wanting to appear bipartisan. And in doing so, unfortunately, he's hurting the Democratic Party. Okay? And so that's sort of the big problem. All right? Now, other things that's being dropped in order to appeal to Republicans is the $600 unemployment checks, and which are now, of course, being booted down to $400. Now, Biden's campaign website said that he would work with Congress to extend the boosted unemployment benefits however long the crisis lasts, the $600. That is not going to happen now. They have already gotten together with the Republicans to boost that down. And so that's the problem. So now Democratic voters are very, very unhappy about this. When they start wobbling on their promises, it kind of really annoys me because it makes makes me feel like a sucker for believing them in the first place, said Shannon O'Brien, a 48-year-old bartender in Averill Park, New York, the Democratic voter. To drop to $400 without needing to, especially if they're going to go through reconciliation, they won't need the Republicans. Without an explanation just seems very disingenuous. Bingo. Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie Frieden, unemployed production electrician and lighting designer in New York City, told HuffPost that, quote, Biden has strapped Democrats in, and we aren't seeing enough offices push more boldly because they understand the urgency to get it done, and splitting the party won't get it done quickly. Moderate Democrats with Republican austerity talking points are currently the barrier to bigger action. And apparently, so are the lobbyists, so are the corporations, and who pay, of course, those moderates. So understand, that's what's going on. That's what's getting in your way of getting a stimulus check. Republicans, they're not in the majority anymore, so there's no need to really reach out to them. You can do budget reconciliation. All Republicans want to do is want to nickel and dime you. That's it. That's not going to get coronavirus under control. That's not going to get the economy moving again. Because honestly, Republicans have a vested interest in not doing anything, in seeing Biden and the economy fail. And they're using this penchant for bipartisan compromise against him. I really wish he wouldn't do that. You would think that after 8 years of seeing this play out, under Obama, would teach Democrats that, hey, it turns out Republicans are not going to argue on good faith. But apparently, they have not learned this lesson. Or they refuse to learn that lesson. And if that's true, you might want to start wondering why. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.